The fantasy season has come to an end, but that doesn't mean that we check out of football. We've got the draft, we've got players being released and traded, we've got coaching changes, and we've got free agency. NFL free agency is one of my favorite times of year, analyzing positional needs for every single team and potential landing spots for free agents. It is the perfect way to fill the offseason. And this offseason, I will have individual videos going through team by team for key free agents. But in this video, we are talking the top free agents this offseason. Just a little something to get you prepped and get you pumped up for the offseason. Before we get started, be sure to like the video if you enjoy it and subscribe if you would love to see more content like this. It would be greatly appreciated. Now let's go ahead and dive right in. We're going to start things off at running back because running back free agency is going to be very interesting this year. We have been spoiled recently at running back when it comes to the draft. Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Achane, Charbonnet, Brees, Kenneth Walker, we have been spoiled. Now, we will be diving into this draft class this season, but obviously when we see landing spots, there could be some strong value. But if GMs look at this class and feel like there's not really a good fit for them, they don't really see any elite talent, they can dip into the running back market. And we did have a bit of a reset here with contracts last season. We got Jonathan Taylor's contract giving us a nice baseline for elite talent. This running back free agency class is excellent, and there is a strong variety for people to pick from. Looking at Derrick Henry, he is the first one on this list. Derrick Henry in 2023, still a 1,000-yard season with double-digit touchdowns, but his overall carries significantly down. And this was the first time that he had, unfortunately, a big dip in effectiveness, averaging under 4 yards per carry for the first time in his entire career. Now, obviously, there are some mitigating factors here. The Titans, they were bad. Offensive line, bad. But Henry is definitely at that point where he is likely to be signed by a huge contender, so he won't have to carry the offense. He's still going to be very hot in free agency. We've also got Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler is up there in age like Derrick Henry, but slightly younger and a lot less miles. Eckler's touchdowns were literally a third of his previous year's production. And like Henry, this was the least effective year of his career. But with his skill set and the possibility of Eckler ending up in a committee backfield, it's high, but more teams are trying to implement that Detroit-style backfield, so there's still opportunity for him here. Now, these next two, Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs, I'm grouping Saquon and Josh Jacobs together because I think the market will view them very similarly. Both of them coming off wildly disappointing seasons compared to their actual ceiling, both of them having their performances very related to poor circumstances, and both of them coming off contract disputes and caving into one-year deals. With Barkley and Jacobs, I could see this going several different directions here. They're the top elite backs without big age concerns in the market. But with such a deep pool, things could get a little bit messy. It'll be interesting to see how this works out. We've also got Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard was franchise tagged in 2023, a decision that is looking pretty good for the Cowboys, depending on how these playoffs shake out and how Pollard performs. We would know pretty quickly whether Pollard's future is in Dallas or if they pursue another agent on the market. Now, we've also got DeAndre Swift. Swift could actually be the most interesting back on the market because Swift is very young. And he finally showcased a complete season, playing nearly all of the season. Touchdowns were still subpar, but he had his first 1,000-yard season, and he could get interest because he'll likely be cost-effective. Other players that are on the market, Devin Singletary, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, A.J. Dillon, Antonio Gibson, and Zach Moss. This is a big grouping full of redemption players like Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, who actually got to operate as the lead back in portions of the season, CEH, Gibson, and Cam Akers, who were once backs that had promise, but, they could still have something in them. J.K. Dobbins with a massive injury, and then A.J. Dillon, who has always played second fiddle in his career. Then we've also got a nice lower tier here. We've got Dalvin Cook, Gus Edwards, Ezekiel Elliott, Donta Foreman, Damian Harris, Savon Ahmed, and Kareem Hunt. Now, moving on to wide receivers. Right off the bat, there is a very big, clear issue with wide receivers. When it comes to running backs, I can see clear tiers. I could easily do an A, B, C, D breakdown of the backs. Teams will be able to pick and choose based off their needs and their budget, and there's so much available. With receivers, it is literally the A tier, and then there is a massive gap to the next grouping. But for us, this could be very interesting. In 2023, top names on the market were DeAndre Hopkins, who obviously is amazing, but age did play a factor in his signing. Jacoby Myers and Juju Smith-Schuster. Adam Thielen was another age factor receiver. Odell Beckham Jr., age and injury factor. And then the Jets inexplicably giving a bag to Alan Lazard. It was an interesting class. This year, Mike Evans, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Marquise Brown, Calvin Ridley. Let's dive into it. Evans had one of, if not the best year of his career. At 30, he is showing zero signs of regression, and he's still a strong free agent candidate. He could go back to Tampa. He could hit the market. I think it just depends ultimately on what he wants. T. Higgins unfortunately had the worst season of his career, but he did have a couple of strong games at the end to really cement that 2024 contract. It's tough to imagine him remaining in Cincinnati, so where he lands as a potential wide receiver one is very critical for our purposes. Michael Pittman had a career year. I love him, and he will be one of the top players on the market. But considering that Indianapolis paid Jonathan Taylor and they'll have Anthony Richardson back and they feel like they're competitive, it's unlikely that they just let Pittman walk. Now, Marquise Brown is coming off his worst season. One guy's coming off their worst season. Even with this rookie season, the same amount of games, more targets, he had even worse than that rookie season. Brown showed extreme upside in his 2023 statistics. They're also, more of a team issue. We can make an excuse for it. He's 26. The market will still view him positively. And then there's Calvin Ridley. Ridley's overall year was fine. It was marred by inconsistency, but the finish, it was overall pretty strong. 1,000-yard season, 8 touchdowns, second best year of his career. And then diving into some other guys, we've got Gabe Davis. I struggle with predicting how teams are going to value Gabe Davis. We've also got Odell that will be on the market again. That obviously will depend on how the Baltimore Ravens do in terms of their Super Bowl aspirations. We've got Curtis Samuel that could garner some interest. And then there's some other guys. There's Michael Thomas, Tyler Boyd, DJ Shark, Josh Reynolds, Noah Brown, Chase Claypool, and Rashid Shaheed. Now, let's talk about quarterbacks. We'll talk about Kirk Cousins first. Prior to the start of the season, general consensus was that the Vikings would move on from Kirk Cousins. And he's actually been a great quarterback, but it just didn't seem like he was the type of quarterback that would lead a team to being a true Super Bowl contender. And the jury is still technically out on whether that's going to happen, but prior to his injury, Cousins was on fire. We'll say he played 8 games because he did play the majority of snaps in that final game that he played in, but through 8 games, Cousins had over 2,300 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, and only 5 interceptions. Now, statistically, he was performing as one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. It was quite the statement to make after all of that offseason speculation. An Achilles injury is obviously no joke, and Cousins isn't exactly super young, and his recovery will likely play a major role in his future. But with how he performed compared to the quarterbacks that relieved him, the Vikings are probably realizing they could do a lot worse than Kirk Cousins. He is the top quarterback on the market, and I can easily see Minnesota fighting to bring him back. We've also got Ryan Tannehill on the market. There's a lot of fodder mid-season that teams like the Jets could trade for him, and while I don't disagree that Tannehill would have been a better solution than Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, and especially Tim Boyle, I think the time of Tannehill as a starter might be done. There's definitely a lot of holes to fill throughout the NFL, but I think that teams throughout the league will have the same evaluation that Tennessee had mid-season. Tannehill isn't at this point where he can drive a team forward for the future, and it's just better to lean into you. He'll likely land somewhere where he can be a bridge quarterback, that would be the best case scenario for him, or a top tier backup. Another option is Baker Mayfield. He will be hitting the market. Baker Mayfield is my dark horse candidate for a solid starter contract this offseason. After getting pushed out of Cleveland, failing in Carolina, and spot starting in LA, he finally found a rhythm in Tampa Bay. I think a lot of that had to do with coaching. And the benefit for Tampa was huge. They didn't have to give somebody a ton of money or spend a ton of draft capital to make a big move on a quarterback, so Baker working out was huge for them. Baker could remain in Tampa, or he could be courted by other teams needing another bridge quarterback that has potential. And then we've also got Russell Wilson as someone who could be a free agent in 2024. I don't know, probably, more than likely. Considering there are legitimate reasons that Russ hasn't been Russ, teams could be chomping at the bit to court him. We're talking a Super Bowl winning quarterback who is still capable of driving a strong team. Russ did make improvements from his 2022 season, and statistically, this year was fine. I think most teams will look at the circumstance and see him as a solid option. With Cousins' injury, Russ could end up being the top target for most teams. Then there's some other guys that could garner some interest, obviously. We've got Jameis Winston, Garner Minshew, and obviously Joe Flacco if he chooses to continue playing. And then tight ends, it's not a flashy group. Honestly, we're not going to dive into it much. Dalton Schultz, he's the clear top candidate. And then we've got Hunter Henry, Gerald Everett, kind of interesting there. Mike Gesicki, Noah Fant, again, not too much to dive into, to be honest. But that wraps things up. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like the video, subscribe if you want more content like this. We'll be diving into free agency content throughout the season, the off season, and we will be preparing you for the NFL draft and for the 2024 fantasy football season. Thank you for watching.